the working class rising up. This is the ruling class punching down.
My day is bigger than your day.
First rule of gladiator school, bro. Don't punch down.
Charging into a goblin's
Hail Trump!
The threat from outside forces is far less sinister, dangerous, and grave than the threat from within.
Control your own body.
We will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country.
We can fight the entire grinding system. Nobody can. But together, everybody can.
I did nothing wrong.
Hello and welcome to Did Nothing Wrong Live, the show that cuts through the noise and helps you make sense of the chaotic information space around us. I'm Griff, and with me are Karl and Jay McKenzie. In today's episode, we will discuss the latest developments from the DOGE accelerationist project, as well as Dr. RFK Jr.'s happy fun plan for sending half the nation to summer camp. And we'll also discuss some ideas for motivating your representatives to really start effectively opposing this stuff. Remember to like and subscribe, smash on those buttons for us. Folks, Jay, Karl, I saw a story in Axios that the Democrats are really upset. Did you guys see this? They're really upset that they're starting to get a lot of phone calls from constituents. The phones are ringing off the hook and they don't feel like this is fair. They feel like they're doing everything they possibly can to oppose this stuff, and they're still getting phone calls from their constituents. And, you know, what do you want us to do anyway?
Yeah, Trump has a mandate and we're not in power. And there's so many phone calls. My voicemail is full, and they're so pissed off. They're so upset that people are saying they're not doing anything, that they decided this weekend to pack their bags, head home, and go back to fundraising. Because the scariest thing of all right now, the biggest fear that we all have, is that we don't get reelected in 2026. And I mean, God damn, heaven forbid, what would happen if some of these people who've had these seats for 40 years, for half a century, had to stop being a member of Congress? What would they do with themselves?
I know.
I just can't believe that people are pushing them. They are doing their best by going on MSNBC
on their
and
massive investment portfolios and potential lobbying jobs.
Listen, Trump has they're going on MSNBC and all the old media, traditional platforms, and saying, well, Trump does have a mandate. He doesn't have the mandate that he's claimed, but you've got Gary Connolly, part of Hakeem Jeffries' rapid response team, who I'm sure is also off fundraising this weekend, spending the week going on MSNBC saying, well, Trump does have a mandate, but he doesn't have a mandate for all the things that he's doing. You don't have to hand it to him. You don't have to hand it to any of these people and say, well, he's doing what the people elected him to do. No, he's not. Stop it. Like they're setting off like, well, I already lost. We're in the pit. Nothing can change. Nothing can happen. We can't do anything. So, Mr. Trump, you know, I support you, but maybe just slow down a little bit, okay?
All I'm going to say to this is fuck all of this, right? So let me just start there. And let's actually look at this for a second. For all of our sake, the reality is the Democrats aren't rising to the moment. They've broken trust with a significant portion of the population, and frankly, we need to take those 40-year-old seats for ourselves. We need to do what should have been done a long time ago and actually done the hard work of getting people who actually have a vision for this country elected. All of this, though, is contingent on something that we also need to factor in, which is that in 2 years, free and fair elections are less than likely. And the reality is what they've said very clearly on the Republican side, both on the, like the side that gets categorized as fringe up until they took the White House, and then the actual Republicans, is basically that like voting is going to end in a meaningful manner. And, people, I don't know if they've forgotten or just blocked out that like Trump literally said, if you vote for me one more time, you don't have to do it again. And
what did he mean by that?
I'm sure. I don't know. It's so obscure. I could never know. I mean, it's like putting your heart out to a crowd, you know, like it could be anything.
It could mean anything.
You could be doing anything.
Yeah.
The reality
say,
is, you know, that with that being the reality, we have to actually work now. Everyone's in a three-way fight. We've moved from a moment where both parties, you know, or even one party has or wants the ability to change course. Well, that puts all of us in a position now. We have to figure out how then to make it happen. And for a lot of people, they're waking up to a reality where they're going to have a little bit more control over their own lives than they've ever had, because some of the controls that have been built in are gone. And that's going to also mean, how then do you respond? Let's say you live in a suburb and you know a few of your neighbors. Well, how do you and your neighbors respond if you see an ICE van roll into your neighborhood? How do you guys actually deal with that? How do you deal with if at some point they start actually making it impossible for interstate travel? And, you know, there are questions that people need to start thinking about for themselves, their loved ones, others in their communities, whether that's their church community, their bingo group, whatever it is you guys do with your friends that you trust. You know, you have to start working with them. And this is a different world.
Yeah.
This isn't something where we have any guarantees. And I think that ambiguity is going to scare people, but also it affords a huge amount of room to really actually mount a pretty sustained pushback against state capture and you know, the destruction of rule of law.
Right. And we're seeing ICE showing up in places that are going to make it important to have that conversation sooner rather than later. I mean, I live in Washington State. We've got a ferry system here that goes from, you know, Seattle to the outlying islands, and we've got ICE on the ferries now. People are posting photos of this to Reddit, and it's kind of like, okay, so what are we doing here? What are we doing? How are we handling this? What are we how are we warning people? How are we making sure that this word gets out that, man, the brown shirts are here? This is not good.
Yeah. No, literally, like, so the information systems, I think people like the infrastructure for actual, like, true resistance, not, you know, click on my homophobic AI image of Musk and Trump, but the actual resistance stuff is infrastructure, right? So it's in building systems for like phone trees that can span big distances, right? And like there are a lot of groups that are already doing this. There are a lot of individuals who already have this kind of infrastructure in their lives. But for a lot of people, especially people who have never had to think like this is new. So, you know, building, you know, if you and your neighbors have like a small community of people you know and trust, set up a phone tree and just start building those things. And if you then find another group that you trust that already has done that, you can start integrating, and it just starts to build, right? And like, you know, none of this is going to have leadership in the way that we've understood it, because it can't, right? The real reality of the kind of regime that we now have in power is that leaders will be targeted. And that means that it's going to be a different kind of thing than it has been in the past. And that's good. It's fine. It's just a different way of doing things, and it actually affords more power to each individual group of friends and individuals in their neighborhoods than having some top-down structure. And so, like, people really do need to start thinking about that, because that works not just for information then, right? That information tree turns into, well, my neighbor can't get this specific food item they have to have, and they're out of other things. So that phone tree then turns into a goods tree, right? And like, so that's just how this works. And if you start to actually do that, you start to build systems of resilience into your everyday life that are going to benefit you as this gets more and more unspooled, because things are going to happen where you know, certain parts of the country are going to have problems, whether or not intentional. It's just by the sheer size of the destruction these people have done to the interior of the bureaucracy of our country. They've damaged things in fundamental ways that will have massive effect. And so people just, if you start to think that way, it doesn't need to be scary. It's just about finding who you trust.
There are little things that you can do that if you haven't already made the switch, you should, such as stop texting and start using Signal. We've talked about the issue with Proton Mail and Proton VPN and the CEO having his head up his ass and not seeing Trump for what he is, but still Proton Mail is the best encrypted service at the moment that you can use if you need to send secure emails. So assume that anything you send could be read, could be used against you in court or by any of these shitheads just to target you in the future. Hopefully that never happens, but take precautions.
Increasingly likely that there will be stuff like that.
And there's little stuff like if you don't have to send something either through text or email and you can say it in person, say it in person. I mean, write it down and burn it after.
Literally, that is the level of stuff where we're at, right? Like, talk to people in person. Don't do it over digital means. This is going to be kind of a return to some weird middle ground of technological use if you actually have things you want to say. And that's kind of an interesting opportunity, right? There are certain things out there that people are going to be doing that probably you won't hear about. And there are going to be things out there that people don't talk about and you never see online. But if you know people, you might get some note or a piece of paper that's handwritten, or you might get a typewriter written note, right? Like, things are going to get a little bit more low tech because that's the way now to hide in the noise. Right? One of the things that digital stuff actually affords is black holes, if you know what to do. If you don't bring your cell phone with you and you don't do certain things, and you're fundamentally obscured. You're not safe by any means, but you're obscured more and more and more. And it's very hard for AI to associate your typewriter written, notes to your friends if they're never online.
Right.
Like, if it's not digital and it can't be easily accessed by digital means, you're going to have some room.
Why do you think people like Trump and other gangsters like him have meetings on golf courses?
Correct.
Because it's almost impossible to listen into this stuff. You need to be essentially the NSA with a drone over their heads to be able to catch a lot of this. So
yes,
think about that for a minute. If you're going to talk about something that might be sensitive, make yourself more of a hard target for listening to. And also understand this. We all want to know what's going on. We all have this human innate desire to feel like we're up on things. There's going to be stuff that you don't need to know. There's going to be stuff that's over your head or above your pay grade or even below your pay grade that you don't necessarily need to know everything about. Try to get used to the idea that you're not going to know everything, and that's a good thing. Because what you don't know, you can't tell anybody.
Exactly. And frankly, the more that you are able to know that you don't need to know everything, the easier things get, right? For you personally, we're doing this thing. We're going to this protest. We're going to this book reading. Whatever weird thing that this is that someone's advertising. That's cool. But your friend, unless you truly trust people, they don't need to know. And it goes with authority figures, right? Authority figures, they ask a question. I have no clue. That's crazy. Wow.
Yeah, man.
Wild, man. That's cool.
Don't know anything about that.
What's that? Literally PR, you're going to have to learn a little bit about personal PR, which is well, that's a great question. Have you guys talked about this today? Literally you're going to have to learn that you're not going to have every bit of information. That's good. And you're also going to need to learn that sometimes people don't need to know information, and that's good. And there's not going to be someone to tell you that. This is going to be something that people learn, and some people learn in the hardest way possible, right? And that's what happens when you have a internally repressive authoritarian regime, and people really haven't clicked on this yet. These people are dead serious about everything they've said. And that means you really do have to then take them at their word, that they're not joking, and plan accordingly for that. not what you hope and what you believe that they might be bluffing on. Because if you're wrong, is that a bet you want to make?
Very basic risk reward stuff. Like, what's the best thing that can happen here versus what's the worst thing that can happen here? And the worst thing that can happen, if it's what we're thinking, it's going to be kind of bad these days. So let's assume that that's the worst that can happen and plan accordingly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's the thing. Like, it's an acknowledgement of a true situation and the logical outcome. And we see that with someone like Dr. Sunshine over here with RFK bringing out the big guns now and basically saying, we are going to take away crucial drugs, whether they're SSRIs, whether they're benzodiazepines, whether they're X, Y, and Z, for large swaths of the population. And they're also, it appears from what has started to come out, going to medicalize these people and institutionalize them in what he's referencing as work camps. So,
work
camps. Work camps.
Work camps.
Work off your depression. Yeah.
Work makes you free, I hear.
Yeah, work will set you free from your depression. Like, this is horrifying end stage Nazi regime shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, they're going to cloud it in this wellness speak, but the reality is these are work camps, and they're going to be work camps for people who have been medicalized for previously, socially accepted and scientifically and medically accepted conditions, ranging from depression and anxiety to probably being a female who speaks back to her husband too loudly. And that traditionally has been how this works in this country, that the medicalization, the institutionalization, and subjugation of minorities also works in tandem with reinforcing a authoritarian patriarchal structure that then allows women to be medicalized and taken out of the picture. And so, that's really what they're setting up here, right? Like, this is a system, both an ideological and what looks to be a governmental legal system, to build camps to replace labor lost and force the mentally unwell into essentially, gulags, for lack of a better word, death camps.
And let's call it what it is. At this point, it's a gulag. This is a gulag.
Yeah, or a death camp. I mean, it's
gulag.
a death camp. It's a death camp, right? And they're going to name the death camps, wellness camps. They're going to do all the gross inversion shit that authoritarians have done, and they're going to claim it's for people's better health and mental health and all this shit, and it's going to work people to death. And it's one part of the larger medical thing that's going on here, the transition to mass eugenics and cultural genocide, using scientific methods, not just what we have done the last few years, which is at the barrel of a gun and with a Bible.
And they're gonna start that conversation with something that makes logical sense to most people in terms of, are we over reliant and on medications? Are we over prescribing? Which I think in most cases, yes, probably true. And yes, does Big Pharma make more money if more people are on drugs? And if you're just only a little bit sick all the time, absolutely they do. But that's just the way they're going to get people in the door to say, maybe he's got a point here. Mm-hmm. And even if there is, this is how disinformation, misinformation works. You don't lie about everything. You don't start with the work camps. You start with a thing that people are like, yeah, maybe too many people do take Adderall. Maybe too many people, think they, have to take pills to go to sleep every night. Yeah, maybe they should look at their diet or at more exercise. Sure, absolutely. But that's just the way they get you in the door. And it just compounds on that until hopefully they get you to a point where you say, well, yeah, maybe these people do need to go work outside for a little while, and then they'll just be fine. And what happened to our neighbor Billy over there? He used to be such a nice fella. Right. Yeah. And that's where we're going. And
then we don't talk about that at some point.
Yeah.
And that's how they get you. They start with that agreement on a seemingly innocuous question of, are medications overprescribed in this country? And the end goal is Dr. Happy Fun Sunshine RFK's outdoor summer camps.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Measles welcome.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and that's just it, right? Like, once you get people to accept the lie or the absurdity or whatever we want to call it, the rest of it really socially just falls in line because it becomes part of the social norm, right? And like,
Right.
this is the thing. They're building a cognitive culture that's fucking gnarly. There's very little else that can be said, right? Like, as someone who's done this a long time, who has dealt with authoritarian regimes, who has dealt with the far right, this is something that like kind of breaks some norms. This is a different kind of movement. You check it from different angles and you get different reflections because it's taken on all of these different horrifying bits and pieces from historical god awful authoritarian movements.
And I
It's
think
like
it's
they've learned
They
from the
have.
successes as well as the failures of various other movements like this through history.
Exactly.
And they're not making some of these mistakes again.
No, they've A/B tested the most horrifying social terror of the last 80 or to 150 years and really incorporated it into a hybrid movement that suits one thing, which is power, but uses every one of the most powerful terror options available to it. And that's why like it's so hard to pin down in some cases, right? Like you get different reflections of different movements depending on how you catch this thing, right? Some of it you'll get a more traditional like fucking conservative, like family evangelical. At a different angle, you'll get NatCon. At a different angle, you'll get just straight up Nazis. At a different angle, like, so this is the thing now, right? This thing is going to be an ever shifting view of all of the movements that it represents, not just what it is. And I think that like there's a level of it confounds people. So we have to get past that. We just have to step aside from that and just deal with the reality. And like these work camps are one of the tough realities. It's a fucking work camp. It is a concentration camp for the mentally unwell.
And I think it's easy enough to look at that RFK talking about work camps, and we sit here and we think, I think naturally we think, oh, that could never happen. Like, this is America, this is the United States. We don't do that. But yes, they're gonna say so many crazy things, and they're not gonna get all of them done. They're not gonna have the support and the backing for it, but they're gonna try. And it's look at what they've already done in a month. In 1 month, and they have 4 years. So to sit there and say, this will never happen, it's impossible, someone will stop this, who's going to stop it? And we ran out of people in Trump's first term who could stand in the way. The state, the institutions bent, and a lot of them broke, and we just barely got through it. And now there's even less, and he's got Musk going in there and just gutting everything, and the megaphone of Twitter can be targeted on anyone who stands in their way. We don't know what they're going to get away with, but it's going to be bad, and they're not going to stop until someone makes them stop. And look, the Democrats are pissed that people keep calling them, and that groups are tying up their phone lines. One, I just want to say, keep calling. And you should feel free. I've been thinking about the right line that you should use. Every time you call, I would recommend saying that Rep or Speaker Jeffries or whoever you're calling, you say that this individual should reconsider their position as a Vichy collaborator.
Yes.
And
yes.
I think at a certain point, we do not advocate violence on this show, and we never will. But I think the Democrats are going to have a long, hard think about what happened to the leaders of the Vichy regime at the end of World War II.
Well, and that's just it. There's this historic component where like people do have to actually think long term. Again, I'm going to say think long term because history will not be kind to the people who actually did work with these people or did not stop them. And we all have to just like understand there's like, I am not a generally, let's say, religious person, but when there's evil in the world, there's evil in the world. And this is actual bona fide evil. And it's one of the rare times where, like, if you align yourself with this isn't like they did something reprehensible, they can walk away from it. This is you literally are going down in history as
You're going to wear this for the rest of your life.
Not, yeah, you're going to wear
and your
this
kids will. Your family name will be mine.
No, literally. I mean, this is one of those rare ones where, like, I think about some of, like, I remember years ago watching a documentary about some of the offspring of both high-level Nazis and some of the Hitler family, not Adolf, but other members. And I mean, some of them had sterilized themselves. Some of them had done other extreme measures, because the reality is, this is truly an evil that's so powerful it will destroy you and everything that comes from you. And I don't like a lot of the time when people frame a political conversation in evil versus non-evil. This isn't a political argument. This is a moral argument. And the reality is, there is no way to stay morally in any way, shape, or form correct when you get too close to this. And much of the establishment, national level Democratic Party has been too close to this too long. And it's warped their ability to be human. And this idea that we are coming back to something that approximates a Democratic Party of what existed 3 weeks or a month ago is just not the case. And that's it. The neoliberal party died. They're still in power, but it's dead now. We have to take their positions. We have to do the hard work, if there are going to be elections, of getting communities together and bringing voices that are actually for people and pro-social to the front. And sometimes that's going to mean agreeing with people who may not have your full vision, your full breadth, the full depth of what you want. It may not have the theory that you want, but those voices have to be boosted, because if we are going to have elections, if we are going to have a shadow government, if we are going to do the things you have to do when there is a fascist coup going on, you can't have people in power who have been in proximity to this evil that long. You can't do it. It won't work. We have to totally rethink the entire party now, because of the proximity to the power of this truly evil force.
Well, and even beyond that, you have to realize that you can't rely on these people anymore, regardless of whether they were close to it. They're just not the people you can trust when the shit is down, when the chips are down. They have proven themselves to be fundamentally unreliable and fundamentally untrustworthy with our democracy. They got to go.
Yeah.
Well, and listen, the future that Trump and MAGA have for them, there is a place at the table for Democrats. The ones who are so concerned about their seats and not losing them, they can keep them. I mean, they can, but they are going to be part of 20 to 30% of the members of Congress. They are going to have token power that they can very rarely exercise in any sort of meaningful way. They will be fake, for the most part, they will be fake token opposition who will be there to essentially be a way to make people feel like they're being heard, like there is some resistance to this, that there is some ability to have someone that you can call and email and complain to, and that maybe somehow things will get better. They're not all going to get kicked out, but if they want to stay there, they will have to fall in line, and they will not make waves, and they will essentially just be accepting the fact that they have a seat to have a seat. They get to be a member of Congress, really in name only. And I'm sure that there are plenty who are honestly, they're not going to love it, but they'll take that over the alternative. So we have to we have to realize that some of these people just, there is no fight in them. They have no
Right.
interest in it. There is nothing that they feel like they can gain from it, and they just won't do it. So they have to go.
Yeah.
Mhm.
No, and that's just it. And I mean, at the end of the day, like pseudo democracy might have the name democracy in it, but so did Buffalo Wings, right? Like, it's not
Mhm.
the real deal.
No.
And for all of us, like, pseudo democracy is not the goal here. Managed democracy, not the goal here. And so, like, we're talking about something now. You know, for most people, they are going to be forced to make decisions every day that consciously you have to choose to be on the side of democracy and multi-pluralism and free expression of thought, and really go that route, because that's how we're going to do this, in part because there is no leadership. We all have
Right.
to become the leadership we want in the world right now, and that's really scary. It's really hard, but it's also, once you do it, it's a muscle. And for a lot of people, they don't know that they are a leader in their respective lives, right? They just go do their thing. Most people don't think about it like that. But if you continue to uphold the values that are important to you, to democracy, to, you know, kind of adhering to social norms that are pro, you know, multi-ethnic, multiracial democracy, the thought that goes with it, you're going to make a huge impact, because people are looking for that and are going to continue to look for that, especially as it gets darker and the horizon seems further away.
People are definitely looking for the helpers at this point, as the old show
Yep.
goes. People are
Yep.
looking for the people that aren't necessarily going to fall apart, looking for the people who have some level of plan. And that's what makes what Musk and Trump and the rest of them are doing so attractive, is because, like, they have a plan. It's not
Yes.
a plan that's going to be anything good for you or your family,
No.
but it's a plan.
Nope. Yep.
Definitely a plan. And we need to be those people with a better plan. And I think we're on the right track towards that, but we can't rely on the folks in Washington, the folks that represent us, outside of a handful of Democratic representatives at this point, because they're
Right.
simply just not holding up their end of the bargain.
Yes.
Well, and that's what we see and what we can tell with this past week. We had the CBS News poll come out, right, that said that Trump's approval rating was actually up. It's at 53%, which it's not a huge jump, but it's better than it ever was in the first term. People actually had shifted there. They are saying positive things about him, and he's, you know, positively viewed as tough and energetic and focused and effective. And all of this seems really bad, and Democrats are reacting to it with, oh, well, we have to go along with it because people like what he's doing, and we have to support that, and we have to follow the polls. And, well, if that's what the people want, then I guess we'll just have to wait. And they're convinced that, well, the things that he's doing are bad, but people like it right now. So we just have to wait until it gets bad enough. We just have to wait until the long-term effects start to kick in and things get bad enough, and then we can reclaim the ground. I know that's their thinking. I know that's what they're waiting for.
Mm-hmm.
But listen, the reason that Trump, and this is one poll, and overall he's still underwater. He's at about 47% on all the polls. But the reason he did well in this one poll is because people who were polled here think that he is delivering on his campaign promises, and they are excited about the fact that someone in Washington, D.C. is actually doing something, that
Exactly.
someone is actually committed to things, whether it's, they don't care if it's executive orders, they don't care if it's Congress. Like, most people don't even understand what Trump and Musk are doing. They don't know the details. They don't know the consequences, what it's going to look like, and they don't care, because people are just desperate for anything to change, anything to be different. And yes, it's bad that Trump is seizing that right now. But what it tells me, and what it tells us about where Democrats and opposition can go from here, is that if you do have a different idea, if you ignore the fucking polls and all the people who are paid to read them and tell you what you should be saying, If you just say, we have a plan, it's a better plan, it's going to help you, it's going to do things, and we're going to do it together, then hey, guess what? You go do it, and people are going to agree. They're going to get behind you. They're going to say, hell yeah. And you can ride that to much better places. That is what people are desperate for. That's what we need. And we need someone other than AOC in Congress willing to call for action.
Yep.
Well, and that's just it, right? Like the thing with that too, if you come up with a plan and you actually start to work the plan, you neuter some of the let's say more accelerationist attempts that may try and fill that void in other ways, right? And like for a lot of people right now, they're looking for action's sake. And while that's good energy, it leads to very problematic stuff sometimes, right? And so like if you have a plan and you lay out steps that are actually achievable by people, and you start laying out, kind of a walking path for people, you're going to gain people on that path with you. And for a lot of people right now, a lot of Democrats, a lot of people who might not be Democrats but are pro-democracy, are looking to take a pilgrimage. So people need to build that path. And if we can do that, and if we can figure out and have leadership level people even just put out stuff that other people have put together that's a plan that they're willing to adhere to and work with and within, that's going to both help solidify a movement, but also it starts to lessen some of the really dangerous social effects that can start to boil up. And we want to mitigate those while also channeling the energy that might also channel that direction the other way. And that's important, right? Like we are going to have to kind of think about how we address all of this and what that actually looks like. And effective pushback right now is going to be more subversive than large protest, I think. And for things to be effective, stuff like what's going on at the Tesla dealerships, for example, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. That's perfect. That's great stuff. Alex Winter and the people doing all of that, amazing stuff. And it's going to be stuff like that where it's just going to be kind of varying levels of intensity at different levels of what we're trying to do. That's how you actually affect change. It's not going to, I mean, yes, if we get 20 million people in the street, yeah, things change. That's very hard to do in the United States.
Yes.
Like, it might happen. I'm not discounting it. We're in a place where anything's fucking possible. So anything's possible. I would love to see a 20 million person march in this country. I'm not going to lie. It would be an incredible show of force. But the reality is the longer sustained thing is not that, right? Like it's that coupled with these other things that have to go on. And, on social media, I've been kind of talking about this and talking around it because it's really important right now. And one of the things that I think would be an interesting organization tactic that I've actually started kind of really looking at is getting churches with large choirs, getting them to sing songs like John Brown's Body, other abolitionist songs from that period, and putting them in the protest space and putting them in these peaceful protest spaces, because the optics shift. The minute you have a crowd that even a few American flags are flying in, and the only thing you're hearing is union songs, trade songs, and shit like John Brown's Body, the optics become very much different than the other direction. And I know we've talked about it a few times over the last few weeks, but like this is one of those ones where if we really start to bring things together, you can do a lot with what we have. And so it's just going to take people starting to put those plans together into what that actually looks like and what groups, people are going to have to, there's going to be a risk assessment here people have to take. But I think, most people are willing to risk a little bit a lot of times versus a few times. And so I think, I think there's a way to make it less risky and more powerful in multiple ways.
I think that's exactly what we need to be doing, and we need to keep brainstorming and elevating the people who are coming up with those ideas, because yes, hit Musk where it hurts, and Tesla and what Alex Winter is doing is fantastic. But I think looking at this, where does the party go from here? Where does opposition go long term? I want people to just think about the messaging, the plan, the future of this party, and ignore what anything is polling at right now. Because look at Republicans right now. Take any number of ideas that they're floating, such as gutting, eradicating, removing the Department of Education, invading Greenland, making Canada the 51st state. What do you think that was polling at in 2015? It was polling at nothing, because no one.
It was insane.
I mean, it was insane.
Get you committed.
Insane. You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't talk about that. You tried to explain that to a voter of any party, any stripe 10 years ago. They had no idea what you're talking about. But you know what? Now Republicans are flying the flag and saying, hell yeah, Trump's getting shit done. Okay, great. Look, we're not going to support those things. We're not going to say this is good, it's bad. They are the baddies. But look, you can take ideas that people may not understand. There may not be broad support, but if you can have a vision and see where it can lead, look, just know that if you can know that right is on your side, you can guide people there, and you can be confident that they will see it. We can take people where we want to go and need to go. We just have to have a little courage. We just have to think beyond the next ad that you're going to put on TV. It does require a complete rethink, but we can do it.
Yeah. Well, we've done it before, right? Like, this is also not unprecedented that a party has to totally restructure itself and think new thoughts about what it is, what it wants, where it goes. And maybe the Democrats have done that, and that's what this is, right? This is what they've rebranded as, is a oligarch-friendly, kind of opposition party. And maybe that's what maybe that's what they are, right? But the reality is, then, if that's the case, well, let's do better than that. Fuck that.
Yeah.
Right?
That's not our party. Yeah.
No, fuck them. That's not our party. So then let's do what we do. And the reality is, common sense approaches to things that a lot of people, especially online lefty types, think are like high theory. You don't need high theory anymore. Throw that shit away. I mean, the theory's good. Keep the theory. Throw talking about it away. Talk purely about the common sense. Like, a great example is someone, Medicare, right? Like, this sounds like some giant bureaucratic thing, but when you actually describe what it is to most people, they're on board, right? Like, everyone knows they need help. And so, like, if you start really going down these logical roads and you don't approach it from like, well, I'm a leftist and I think, and you just say, look, I think that people should get health care because they're a citizen in the richest country in the history of the world. And we've, even if they're not part of our day-to-day life, even if there's someone you don't know or don't agree with or doesn't look like you or think like you or doesn't believe the same things you do, they deserve the same rights as I do. And that, that's a pretty common sense fucking approach. And for most people, they're not going to disagree with that. And that already put them at odds with the Republican Party. And part of this is going to be breaking people out of the groupthink that the Republican Party has instilled. And the minute you get people thinking on their own, the spell breaks. I've said it before and I'll keep saying it. If you can get them to think on their own, outside of the group, you start to break them free. And if you do that and you get enough people to really start doing it, it self-sustains, because those people who've changed their view based on what's been said to them and changed their, we're not that different. It starts to transmit itself socially. And like, it's not fast, but it's faster than a lot of people think. The Republicans did it in 15 years.
Yep.
And like, we don't have 15 years of this to do, to get out, but like, we do have an ability to do that work. It does, like you said, take some courage, and really it takes people who are willing to say, look, this is an imperfect system. It's not gonna be perfect, but we can get it much closer than it fucking was, and definitely way closer than it is now.
Yeah.
Well,
We
and we
don't
don't.
need 15 years to make this
No,
work.
fuck no.
Yeah. The landscape
No.
has changed. I mean, the environment has changed. We have
Fundamentally.
yes, and you can get that information to people much quicker, much easier. We can do it much faster. I mean, they laid the groundwork and they made it work for them. But you're right. Like getting people out of their bubbles is key. Get them thinking for themselves is absolutely where we have to go. We have to realize that was the brilliance of the right wing shtick about do your own research is that they convinced people they were thinking for themselves when they were all collectively just signing on to groupthink and they didn't realize it. And if you can explain to them that you're not doing your own research, it's regurgitated Russian propaganda, fascist propaganda schlop that is getting, just thrown in your face and you're made to think it's something new and it isn't. Like you have to tell them you think you're a free thinker, but man, you're a slave to their talking points.
Well, right, and I think that's the thing. Like, one of the dangers with the conspiracy culture they had built was exactly that, because it gave people, we're just free thinkers, and really you're building a cage, right? So the opposite of that, though, is you don't tell them to be a free thinker. You tell them, look, like this is my this is my life. This is how this has affected me. I'm sure it's affected you similarly. And you start there, right? Like people, all of us have a common ground here. Not all of us. Some of these people are terrible fucking people that have no common ground with any of us and whatever, fuck them. But the reality is most of like the people who have been truly duped by MAGA in the case that they were, you're probably going to be able to bring them around. I've seen it happen multiple times where someone comes in super hot and you just have a like, look, yeah, it sucks, man. Like, I don't make enough money either. You don't either. What the fuck are we doing? Like, it's not, like I don't look at you and say, you're the reason I lost my paycheck because it's my boss's problem. Just like it's your boss's problem that you don't get yours. That, like, the starting to bridge and build these, like, dissonances for people who have been inside that bubble, we're going to start to force the issue. And I think, that is incredibly powerful, especially if it's someone in your community. Like, I just think about small communities where there are people who are definitely Democrat living in red states where they're surrounded by people who are in their community who might have voted for Trump. Yeah. Jay.
In Tennessee.
Look at you, Jay. Look at you, Jay. But again, like if you talk to your neighbors in a real way, y'all are going to agree on more than not in some cases. And that opens up a possibility then to have the next conversation and the next one. And those don't always work. You're not going to change everyone's mind, but what you're doing is you're giving them a real world reference that kind of rubs against what they're being told. And the more they run into that, it does. I mean, that affects people, right? And like, the more of that I think people start to experience on both sides, it's going to get real interesting because there is going to be some give here because Trump is going to make certain strands of Republican very uncomfortable in a fundamental way if he hasn't already, right? Because this does run contrary to everything old school conservatives that still vote Republican in some cases believe. And, there's a class element to this that wasn't as finely pointed in the first round. And now that you got Musk on board, there are people who were pro-Trump because they didn't think he was like that kind of rich guy, but now he's aligned with one, right? Like there are a lot of areas now where we can have conversations that may allow at least some friction in the thought process. And the more we do that, the better chance we have of being able to say, look, you got fucking duped. Shit happens. And for some people, that's going to be the way that they start to pull out. For others, they're never going to pull out, right? Like the racists, the true racists, the true fucking extremist element of the Trump camp probably is not going to move on until they are forced.
But we don't need all of them. We don't even need most of them.
I don't need any extremists or any of the Nazis or the racists. What we need is to be able to get into where that language, that thought structure, that belief structure that's been built starts to have friction that's community friction, not top down, the news telling you that you're just a bunch of red state hicks that deserve everything that's happened to you, because the MSNBC brain shit where it's like, we're going to abandon these red states isn't going to do shit but make the Republicans more powerful. So we have to actually do the work that they abandoned, which is building a true coalition throughout states that don't look or sound or believe the same way you do in some northeastern or west coast blue state.
And that's why we need to rethink, because there is nothing about the Democrat messaging, Democratic Party that reaches these people in any way.
Fuck no.
And it's just, and they're not even trying, and we have to get away from that, because most of my neighbors voted for Trump, but honestly, they're good people.
That's just it.
Right. And they don't want pain and suffering. They just, one party spoke to them and the other didn't even try, didn't even bother. And that's the wrong way to go about this.
Well, that's just it, right? Like, we have to, like, the party has to do a postmortem. And if the party isn't going to do it, the people have to do a people's postmortem on the party. And they're going to either have to listen to that postmortem report, or they're going to have to be moved out of the way. And the reality is that postmortem starts well before Trump won. And that's the thing, right? Like, the thing that led to Trump is the actual failure of the Democratic Party, not just the response, right? And like, that's the part that is, I think, the hardest part for especially the 40-year-in Democrats, is that means they were complicit in it, and that they fundamentally sold something out that broke the process. And, you know, I kind of joke with friends that, like, Clinton ended democracy, but, like, if we really want this postmortem to be correct, it starts with the deregulation of the country by Clinton, right? And we start the postmortem there and work to now, and you see the problems.
It sucks that we didn't listen to Howard Dean in 2005 and 2006 when he was trying to do a 50-state strategy. We're going to contest everything. And one little scream and the whole thing changes.
I know.
It's so frustrating.
I actually think we need to play everyone that scream, just so they remember how little derailed actual, like, thinking.
You know something? If you had told us 1 year ago that we were going to come in third in Iowa, we would have given anything for that. And you know something? Not only are we going to New Hampshire, Tom Harkin, we're going to South Carolina and Oklahoma and Arizona and North Dakota and New Mexico. And we're going to California and Texas and New York. And we're going to South Dakota and Oregon and Washington and Michigan. And then we're going to Washington, D.C. to take back the White House. Yeah! We will not give up. We will not give up in New Hampshire. We will not give up in South Carolina. We will not give up in Arizona or New Mexico, Oklahoma, North Dakota, Delaware, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan. We will not quit now or ever. We want our country back for ordinary Americans.
Versus fucking rapey McHitler,
right?
And the White House of now. I think
different
it's
place in this country.
I think it's good contrast. Got kicked out for a scream, likes to do some sexual raping and some Nazism, and White House. I think that, you know,
they're
that
the
again,
same picture.
Yeah, God. Oh God. You know, that's the thing though. Again, this postmortem goes back a ways, right?
Yes.
And so, like, I think that's the thing. There hasn't been a good conversation at a high level about what has happened for 30 years. And we have to now. And that means that it is a complete rethink, and it's going to be a bottom-up rebuild by people who actually want what we were sold, which is a functional democracy that represents every one of us, not just a few people who had money and power at some point. And that means we have to actually fight for that now. And so that, for myself at least, is the way that I'm looking at this. Is now we're going to do Reconstruction 3. And that has to be the model, right? We're going to do Reconstruction 3. We're going to rebuild an actual pluralist democracy that's multiracial, that's multicultural, that holds every bit of the story that we've told ourselves about America, and we're going to make it real. And we're going to do that the best way we can. Right. And that's the goal now. And if the party doesn't have that goal, then we have to fundamentally redo it. And that's fine.
Well, and you don't have a choice. But if you want actual real power again, that's what you're going to have to do. And the longer you wait, the harder it's going to be. The more impediments are going to be put up and roadblocks that stop you from getting there. So either do it now or wait, and it gets harder. And then it gets harder again. And the moment is now. Seize the moment.
Yeah. Well, and the cultural reproduction of democracy is very hard to kill, like in total, but to rebuild is very long work.
Yes.
We need to get to it now.
But this is the moment, and we have to decide whether we're going to meet it or not.